Hey, in this episode, we're going to talk about what the Schengen Area is. We're going to talk also about what the addition of Romania and Bulgaria is going to mean for full-time travelers like ourselves, and what some of the new rules are going to be going into effect for travel to Europe in 2025.
Hey there, we're Joel and Michelle, the Wandering Hartz, and we're living a more abundant life abroad through slow travel.
This episode is actually part of our Nomadic Abundance podcast. You can find that on YouTube, and soon you'll be able to find that on anywhere else you can find a podcast as well. You can check out our YouTube playlist if you want to see more of these types of videos as well. Today we're going to do an overview of the Schengen Area, otherwise known as the Schengen Zone, and how it's relevant to you if you're traveling to Europe. We're also going to talk about a couple new additions to the Schengen Area, which is Bulgaria and Romania. And we're going to outline the 180-day rule in relation to both fast and long-term travelers. We're going to explain what ETIAS is and what it's for and how it's going to impact you. And we're going to give you some tips about how you can travel in the Schengen Area.
So first, we're going to go over what the Schengen Zone or area is. So you might have heard of it, or maybe you haven't, and wondering just what is this? So it's actually borderless travel, and it's comprising 29 countries as of 2024, and it allows free movement for travel, commerce without border checks. So basically, just think of it like you're traveling through the United States.
So you probably are kind of confused as like what the difference between the European Union is and the Schengen Area. So they're related, but they're not the same thing. The European Union is actually a political and economic union of 29 different countries in Europe, while the Schengen Zone or Schengen Area is actually an area within the EU where citizens can travel between countries with just their passports or a visa.
So just to give you a little bit of background, the Schengen Area was signed into agreement on 1985 and then implemented in 1995. So it started out with 7 countries, and then many countries have joined, with the most recent being Croatia in 2023, and now Bulgaria and Romania are joining in 2024.
So one aspect of the expansion of the zone is mainly for economic growth and trade, but also for added security in the EU. Again, now with Bulgaria and Romania on there as part of the zone, it basically kind of extends that European border. If you're a non-EU citizen and you're going to be traveling to the EU or any of the Schengen Zone countries, you're probably wondering what all of this means, especially with the new additions of Romania and Bulgaria to it. Essentially, if you're doing like fast travel, where you're spending less than 90 days in the Schengen Zone, the inclusion of Romania and Bulgaria will help kind of streamline your entry into other Schengen countries. It basically simplifies travel by removing a lot of those border checks for both air and sea entry, and that's going to happen as of March 31st in 2024. As of filming this, they are still kind of in talks about like when and how they're exactly going to include the land borders. So you want to just be aware of that for now, as you still might go through checks when traveling by land, as well as making sure you have your standard documentation and security screenings for both air and sea travel. Now, the inclusion of Romania and Bulgaria will have kind of an impact on digital nomads or full-time travelers like we are. So in the past, both Bulgaria and Romania have been 2 of several European countries which have not been subject to the 90 and every 180-day rule. That basically means that they've had their own visa systems. So for instance, you could spend 90 days in each of those countries independently. So you could spend 90 in Bulgaria, then go to 90 in Romania, and then go back into the EU if you wanted to.
Which is what we have been doing in the last 2 years.
Right, and so that's what a lot of people do, especially if they're long-term travelers or slow travelers, and they're wanting to spend a lot of time in Europe. But now that's no longer possible. So now anytime you spend in Bulgaria or Romania will of course count towards your full Schengen time.
Hey, if you're finding this helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. You can also find more information on our website, wanderinghartz.com, and you can sign up for our weekly newsletters that are full of practical travel tips and full-time travel guides to help you live a more abundant life through slow travel.
So you're probably wondering what the 180-day rule is and kind of what it means. In a nutshell, The US and 59 other residents of other countries can spend up to 90 days out of every 180 days in the EU Schengen area for visa-free travel. So what that means is that you'll have to leave the area or the zone, returning either to your home country or going to another non-Schengen country, and wait for your time to, basically wait for those 90 days to come back up before you can re-enter that area. So for example, if you're a US person with a US passport, you can book a flight without applying for a visa ahead of time, which is part of the visa-free travel. In that case, you could actually enter the Schengen zone, say on the 1st of March, and stay for 90 full days straight. After that, you would need to leave the Schengen zone on, in this case, that would be 90 days would be the March 29th. And after 90 days outside of that zone, out of those countries, you'll be able to re-enter the area again. So the way it works is essentially, it works like on a rolling basis so that your time in the Schengen zone basically resets 180 days after you first enter. So if you entered...
It's kind of confusing.
It's a little confusing, but you enter on, again, March 1st, and then 180 days later, that day comes back, right? So you can actually start using those dates again. So that's kind of how people do a bunch of different schemes where they go like a month in and a month out, or like 90 days in and then 90 days out.
So as a long-term traveler, you are going to run into some challenges with this kind of 90, 180-day rule. So most full-time travelers or digital nomads who wish to stay in Europe will leave, and you can go to 15 other non-Schengen countries. And then you can stay there until your time resets. And that is what we have been doing.
Right.
So we recommend using a Schengen calculator to keep track of your time, because it can get kind of tricky, especially if you're going in and out. Say like you go in for a month and then you leave. It's best to have that calculator kind of just always like pulled up, or at least you know where it is. You can kind of quickly calculate your days.
Like we mentioned, there's actually going to be some new rules for travel to Europe, and that starts in the spring of 2025. Basically what is called ETIAS, and that stands for European Travel Information and Authorization System. And it's a new requirement for any visa-exempt travelers that are visiting the 30 European countries that are inside the Schengen area. Essentially, it's a security measure that pre-screens travelers for potential migration or security risks before they're actually traveling to Europe. Like I said before, it's expected to start around spring of 2025, but it's been postponed a couple times already. You may have seen a video about this already on YouTube somewhere where they talked about it starting at the beginning of 2024, and that did not happen. So there's still a chance it might get pushed again, but anyways, this is still good information because it's eventually going to happen. And another thing about it is it's not a visa, but it's actually a visa waiver program, which is, I guess, different. So now you're probably wondering who needs one, and essentially all non-EU residents of the 60 countries, like I mentioned, including the US, Canada, and the UK, who don't have residency permits that allowing them to stay in any of the EU countries, this is who it applies to. When you do apply for it, it's actually good for 3 years, or whenever your passport expires first. We're actually going to have a whole episode here soon where we just kind of really go into much more detail about the ETIAS, where we cover everything you need to know about it. So you want to check back on our YouTube channel or check back to the podcast for that.
If you're finding this content helpful, you can support our project by sharing this episode, liking it, or subscribing. If you want to support us monetarily, you can buy us a drink or even send us a super thanks through YouTube. You can also check out some of the ebooks that we have on our website and some new merch that we have been working on.
Now, however you choose to show your support, it really helps us out a ton, and we really appreciate it. It helps us to continue offering videos like this where you can learn how to live a more abundant life through travel.
Finally, we're going to talk about some of the tips for traveling throughout the Schengen zone if you're going to be heading to Europe this year or next year. And we would say the first and probably biggest one is do not overstay. Don't overstay your time in the Schengen. You could be hit with fines, deportation, incarceration, or even banned from re-entry. So yeah, keep track of your time with that calculator.
Yeah, so another thing to remember is that your first day, your last day, and any day that you're actually transiting through any part of the Schengen zone counts towards your 90 days. And this is what trips up a lot of people. In fact,
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of friends that have dealt with this as well, where you're like, oh crap, I didn't realize that travel day counts. But it does. Again, this is why we say it's really helpful to use that calculator, because you can put all the dates in and it'll tell you exactly where you're at. And we also recommend like always leaving a few extra days just in case. If you have like a flight that gets delayed or something like that, you don't want to get stuck somewhere and end up overstaying either. Also, another thing to remember is that your passport needs to be valid of at least 3 months past the date when you are actually leaving the Schengen zone. So you may actually be denied entry if you don't have at least 3 months time on your passport when you enter. And so a general rule of thumb is you kind of want to make sure you've got at least 6 months, that your passport's good for at least 6 months prior to your departure into any Schengen area country. Also, upon first entering or leaving the Schengen zone, your passport must be stamped. This is very important because without a stamp at your port of entry, you may encounter problems with local authorities or immigration officers when you're trying to leave, because they'll get really confused as to like, well, like, how do you even get here,
Yeah. We actually had that happen to us in Corfu.
Yeah, Corfu, Greece. We have that. They couldn't find our stamp. They eventually found it, but we had to stand aside, and then they had to come back to us.
Yeah.
So it was a little confusing. But,
Yeah.
however, this will be changing in 2025 with the implementation of EES, which is basically going to be like a digital stamp instead. So basically, they're just tracking it in the computer system instead of actually stamping your passport.
So no more stamps.
No more stamps in the future, in 2025. Yeah. Unless you're watching this from 2025, in which case you probably already know about it. Now you can find links to all the official resources for the Schengen travel information as well as the ETIAS information in the description.
Yeah, and if you have any thoughts or questions for us, please let us know. Or if you have questions about Schengen, or maybe you're just kind of confused about how it works, let us know in the comments. We're happy to help you. For more practical travel tips on integrating slow travel or full-time travel into your lifestyle, you can sign up for our newsletter. Just scan the QR code and it'll take it to our website. Happy wandering.
Happy wandering.